NASA, or more specifically NASA payloads, are going to be landing on the moon later this year, or possibly next year. While human landings are still likely 4 or 5 years away, robotic precursor missions are scheduled to fly very soon under NASA's Commercial Lunar Payload Services program, or CLPS. CLPS itself is part of the larger Artemis program, which has the goal of establishing a sustainable human presence on and around the moon by the end of the decade. So what exactly is CLPS, and when will the first landings occur? Missions under the Artemis banner have already begun. A Pathfinder CubeSat called Capstone is already on its way to the moon to evaluate a special orbit for the Lunar Gateway outpost. And the first launch of the Space Launch System, Artemis 1, is set to fly within weeks. However, with CLPS, NASA is hoping to get access to the lunar surface sooner by working with American companies to deliver science and technology via small commercial landers. CLPS was first announced in April 2018, shortly after NASA canceled its Resource Prospector rover. The agency instead announced a program for companies to bid for contracts to land uncrewed payloads. It's a model based partially on the commercial crew and cargo programs for the International Space Station. Just over 6 months later, NASA selected an initial 9 companies that could be allowed to bid on contracts, which the agency said are indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity, worth up to $2.6 billion through 2028. The companies selected were Astrobotic Technology, Deep Space Systems, Draper, Firefly Aerospace, Intuitive Machines, Lockheed Martin, Masten Space Systems, Moon Express, and Orbit Beyond. Additional companies were added a year later in November 2019. Blue Origin, Ceres Robotics, Sierra Nevada Corporation, SpaceX, and Tyvak Nano Satellite Systems. These companies are responsible for building their lander designs, which they own and can use for other customers and not just NASA. For its part, NASA plans to use these missions to test technologies that could be useful for future astronauts. It also wants to better understand how much water ice is actually in the lunar regolith and rock, and how easy it is to potentially harvest. For years, it was speculated that water ice may exist in the polar regions of the moon inside permanently shadowed craters. But this was only confirmed in 2009. Additional observations suggest that even parts of the sunlit surface may have water in some concentrations. But we still don't know how much there really is, or how easy it would be for astronauts to harvest. If collected, water ice could be processed for drinking water, as well as separated into hydrogen and oxygen for air, rocket fuel, or even power. The first 3 lander awards in May of 2019 went to Astrobotic, Intuitive Machines, and Orbit Beyond. But about 2 months later, Orbit Beyond dropped out of the contract. Astrobotic was awarded $79.5 million, while Intuitive Machines was awarded $77 million for a single mission each. Additional contracts were added over the next couple of years. Masten Space Systems in April 2020, Firefly Aerospace in February 2021, and Draper in July 2022. Their awards were $75.9 million, $93 million, and $73 million respectively. Moreover, Intuitive Machines and Astrobotic were awarded additional landing contracts. 2 for Intuitive Machines at $77.5 million each, and 1 for Astrobotic to land a large science rover at the surface for a cost of about $320 million. As of July 2022, there have been 8 service delivery task awards issued to 5 companies. The first 2 are to be performed by Astrobotic and Intuitive Machines. Both are close to being ready to launch as early as late 2022 or early 2023. Quickly before talking about those missions though, be sure to launch this video's like button into orbit. It helps the YouTube algorithm and lets me know what you are all interested in. Astrobotic and Intuitive Machines are both vying to be the first US-based spacecraft to land on the moon since 1972. Astrobotic's Peregrine lander is set to launch on one of the first flights of United Launch Alliance's Vulcan rocket. It'll carry 24 payloads, including 11 from NASA. Its maximum payload mass is expected to be about 90 kilograms. The small Peregrine lander is expected to land on Lacus Mortis, which means Lake of Death, for an 8-day mission. It's located in the moon's northern hemisphere. Its launch date, however, is dependent on the readiness of ULA's Vulcan rocket, which isn't expected to fly until late 2022. As of April 2022, the Peregrine lander was expected to be shipped to Cape Canaveral in Florida by the end of the year to begin final preparations for launch. Meanwhile, Intuitive Machines is nearly ready to launch its Nova C lander atop a Falcon 9 rocket. This lander can carry about 100 kilograms of payload to the lunar surface. Called IM-1, the first mission is expected to land somewhere between Mare Serenitatis and Mare Crisium in the moon's northern hemisphere and operate for about 14 days. It is going to include up to 5 NASA payloads as well as several for additional customers. NASA hopes to fly 2 CLPS missions per year on average, After the first Astrobotic and Intuitive machine landings, there will be another by Intuitive Machines and one by Masten Space Systems, likely in 2023 or 2024. The one by Masten, however, is in question because the company just recently filed for Chapter 11 reorganization bankruptcy in late July 2022. IM-2 would see another Nova-C lander sent to the lunar South Pole, not far from Shackleton Crater. It is also expected to be the first object to land at the moon's South Pole. Aboard will be NASA's Prime 1 payload, which stands for Polar Resources Ice Mining Experiment 1. Its goal is to use a drill called the Regolith Ice Drill for exploring new terrain, or Trident, to deposit material on the moon's surface. A mass spectrometer will then observe and analyze any volatile gases that escape from the extracted material, such as sublimating ice. Other payloads on the lander are to include a space-hardened 4G LTE network by Nokia to test how well a small rover communicates using the high-speed cellular network. The rover is being designed and operated by a company called Lunar Outpost. The future uses for Artemis astronauts include high-definition streaming of video from distant research sites to base stations, and more. Also flying to the moon during the IM-2 mission would be the first node in a lunar data relay constellation called Constellation to be built by the company. The first spacecraft will be placed in a stable lunar orbit. As early as 2024, a third Nova-C could be used to send 4 NASA payloads, which includes several small rovers to Oceanus Procellarum in the Rainer Gamma region. NASA wants to study a particular type of feature on the moon called a lunar swirl, which is thought to be related to the moon's crustal magnetic field. Just like IM-2, IM-3 would carry another node for the company's Constellation, this time placing the small satellite in an L2 orbit, meaning it would orbit a gravitationally balanced space between the Earth and the Moon. But perhaps the most anticipated mission of the CLPS program is the delivery of NASA's Viper rover to the Moon's South Pole to search for water. Viper stands for Volatiles Investigating Polar Exploration Rover. It is expected to be delivered using Astrobotic's Griffin lander, which would start its journey on Earth atop a Falcon Heavy rocket. Right now, NASA expects Viper to launch in late 2024. After landing at the lunar South Pole, it would drive off the lander to begin searching for ice and other potential resources and help determine how much could be harvested by astronauts. Viper is about the size of a golf cart with a mass of about 450 kilograms. It's expected to have 3 spectrometers aboard it as well as a 1-meter drill that will be powered by a solar-charged battery. It is designed to last for at least 100 Earth days and drive about 20 kilometers. Its maximum speed will be just under 3/4 of a kilometer per hour. Viper's goal is to analyze ice on the surface and subsurface at various depths and temperatures, as well as in different soil environments. NASA said the hope is to use that data to create resource maps to allow scientists to figure out where large concentrations of ice are located. This could help inform landing sites for crewed Artemis missions later in the decade. Ultimately, if large enough quantities of ice are found, it could allow for the establishment of a long-term base on the moon. After Viper, 2 more missions are contracted, likely with launch dates in 2025 or later. Firefly Aerospace's Blue Ghost and Draper's Series 2 landers. While Firefly is currently working on a rocket to launch small payloads into space, it's also working on a lander called Blue Ghost. Its mission for NASA is to deliver a suite of 10 payloads to the moon's surface, likely at Mare Crisium. Blue Ghost is expected to have a payload capacity of about 155 kilograms and launch atop a Falcon 9 rocket. The most recent contract awarded as of July 2022 was to Draper. After launching atop a Falcon 9 rocket, the Series 2 lander is expected to touch down at Schrödinger Basin on the far side of the moon to collect data on seismic activity, heat flow, and electrical conductivity of the lunar subsurface. NASA also wants to measure electromagnetic phenomena created by the interaction of solar wind and plasma within the region. This would be the first US mission to the lunar far side. China was the first to do so overall in 2019. Any spacecraft on the far side of the moon will require relay satellites to communicate with Earth. Draper is working with Blue Canyon Technologies to deploy 2 satellites before the planned landing. Also worth noting is the lander itself is based on a design by Japanese-owned iSpace Incorporated, which had a team competing for the $30 million Google Lunar X Prize. It was hoped that the Google Lunar X Prize would see the first privately funded team land a lunar rover on the moon by 2018. However, no team succeeded in that feat. So, in total, there are 5 companies with 6 different lander designs and 8 missions contracted to send NASA and commercial payloads to the moon for the CLPS program. Let me know in the comments below which is your favorite lander or mission. Later in the decade, CLPS landing systems are expected to deliver future lunar terrain vehicles to the South Pole for Artemis astronauts to use in much the same way that the last Apollo missions used their lunar roving vehicle. So far, several companies are proposing LTV concepts for crewed and uncrewed service operations. For example, Northrop Grumman recently announced it was teaming up with AVL, Intuitive Machines, Lunar Outpost, and Michelin to design a rover that would be able to be controlled by astronauts in person or remotely. Should NASA select Northrop Grumman's design, it could be sent to the moon's surface via an Intuitive Machines Nova-D lander, which is expected to be able to deliver some 500 kilograms to the lunar surface. While it's been a long wait, humanity is finally making its way back to the moon. The Commercial Lunar Payload Services program is going to enable more payloads by more people and organizations to reach the lunar surface in a sustainable way. Shortly after the end of the US Apollo program in 1972, there were only 3 uncrewed moon landings that culminated in a sample return in 1976. All of those were by the Soviet Union. There were no moon landings again until China placed a rover on the surface in 2013. Since then, there were 4 additional landing attempts, 2 by China, 1 by a private Israeli company, and another by India. Only the Chinese landings were successful. The country landed a rover on the far side of the moon in 2018 and brought back samples during another mission in 2020. So there is no guarantee that these first US commercial landings will be successful. After all, landing on the moon is really hard. While NASA continues to develop the big hardware for humans, CLPS will allow the agency to buy down some risk early while potentially conducting groundbreaking science. The first big Artemis mission, of course, is Artemis 1, which is expected to launch very soon. You can watch a video about Artemis 1 right here when it's completed, otherwise you can watch this video right here about NASA's overall Artemis program plans. If you're enjoying this content, consider letting me know with a Super Thanks purchase. I'm trying to do this full time and any support makes it easier for me to spend more time making more videos. No worries if you can't do that. The most important thing for you to do is like and share this video and subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks again for watching, and until next time, ad Astra.